Hello and welcome to a new watercolour video. In today's video I'm going to be painting this cute little blue toadstool with some little bees which have nice shimmery wings, and I'm doing this in a step-by-step tutorial style, so if you want to have a go and paint along it should be quite easy to follow. And also if you don't want to draw the mushroom yourself, I've got the line work available to download free of charge. It's on my Patreon page and I'll leave a link below. And if you really like the picture, I also have these available as a print to purchase in my online Shopify store, and I'll leave a link below to that if you want to take a look. Okay, so the paper I'm using for this is Archie's cold press, and it's like a square block of paper. I'm using Winsor & Newton watercolors, and all the brushes and everything, I'll put links to those in the description below. I'm just using a kneaded eraser here just to roll off some of that excess pencil marks. The first thing I want to do is put some masking fluid on the little spots on the mushroom. And now I'm wetting the whole area of the top of the mushroom. I'm carefully avoiding the bees. Now I want the whole area to be wet, but we don't want it to be absolutely saturated with puddles of water. You just want like a nice sheen. So I'm just mixing up some Cerulean Blue here. And it's quite a strong mix because we're dropping it into water. And then I'm just loosely dropping that in to the wet surface, kind of more or less all over. I want it a little bit lighter in the middle though.
Come on, soft, turn the key and cooler off.
And we don't want it too dark because we're going to apply more layers. But I am adding a little bit more paint to the outside area. And I'm not making it perfectly even. We want it to look quite uneven.
Push a pause for relief. Free pass, you don't even have to ask to be the cat in the sun. Someday I will see the whole deal through. Today I've got better things to do. Okay.
And now I'm getting some Prussian Blue. So this is a darker blue. And I'm making a fairly dark mix on the palette. And then dropping that in around the edges, just in a kind of messy fashion. We don't want it to look perfect.
Be the cat in the sun. Be the cat in the sun. Set aside every empty spreadsheet line
And just drying it off with a heat gun just to speed up the whole process, because it does take a long time to dry on its own. Okay, now I'm wetting the whole area again, and we're going to add some more colour. So just the same as before, not too wet. And I'm dropping in more of that Prussian Blue, kind of around the little dots on the toadstool, and then also around the edges.
on the grind. Simmer down, settle back and mess around.
And now that that's completely dry, this third layer we're doing wet on dry. So the paper's dry and we're going in with the colour on the dry paper. So I'm wanting to add just little bits of texture. I'm going around the edges. I'm adding little dashes, little marks. We want it to look a little bit scuffed up, but I'm mainly putting all these little marks and dots around the edges of the mushroom. And it doesn't matter if they look a little bit too harsh, because you can go in with a damp brush afterwards and blend them out a little bit.
I will see the whole deal through today. I've got better things to do. Okay, to lead a little bit undone. Be the cat in the sun. Be the cat in the sun.
Now I'm just rubbing off all the little bits of masking fluid. So I'm using an eraser and then sometimes just with my finger. Sometimes it is easier with your finger. And then that's revealing the lovely white dots underneath. And now I'm going to start on the bees. And I'm using a nice warm yellow, which is Winsor Yellow. And I'm just painting in all the little yellow areas, so it's quite simple. I'm avoiding the wings.
Stretch out, lean back, be the cat. Stretch out, lean back, be the cat.
And now I'm making a mix for the mushroom stalks. So I want kind of a grey beige mix, and I'm using burnt umber and Payne's grey. So I just keep adding the two colours until I get a kind of mid-tone that looks like it's neither too brown nor too blue, so you get a nice grey colour. And then I'm making that fairly watery. So I'm painting that on the hole underneath of the mushroom and the stalk of the mushroom, and you can see it's a fairly light watery mix, and it's not wetting wet. This is just right onto the dry paper. This is just the very base layer. We'll be adding more layers on top. Now with a really tiny brush, I'm adding a little shadow to the bottom edge of all the little white dots. So just kind of the bottom and halfway up the sides in a kind of a C shape. Next I'm going to add some detail to the underneath of the mushroom. Now I think they're called gills. It's the little lines underneath the head of the mushroom. So they've got to be kind of curved to make it look realistic. So we start at the top and then curve down. So it's just all these C shapes. So this is a much stronger mix of that grey that we've just mixed. So make some of these lines wavy as well. And then as they get further up towards the head, they go more horizontal. The lines are kind of more horizontal, but I'm keeping them wobbly. And then I'm adding a lot more paint to the middle area and just letting that kind of spread out into the little gills that I've painted. And then making it a lot darker right underneath the edge there. And then while those are still wet, I'm messing parts of it up, so only some of those gills are showing, so it doesn't kind of look too stripy. And then we will add more details over the top once that's dry. And this little brush is probably one of my favourites, if not my favourite watercolour brush. I've had it for quite a few years now, and it's absolutely brilliant for detail. And it's from Rosemary & Co, and it's series 230, and there's just the one brush, and it's just brilliant. In fact, I've literally just ordered another 3 of these brushes, so they'll last me a lifetime, because the fear of me not being able to get hold of them again, I would definitely recommend anybody who's into watercolour paint to get one of these brushes. I'll put a link below, but if you just want to look for it yourself, it's series 230, and they're only about £2.50. Okay, so now onto the top part of the stalk, and as you can see, painting, it looks kind of like an arch. It's the shadowing, and then I'm adding plain water into the middle and then blending the plain water towards the painted area, just so it gets a nice soft blend there. And now I'm just going to outline this part of the mushroom. And remember, I'm still using that same colour that I mixed with the burnt umber and the Payne's grey. And now I'm getting a little bit of clear water, and I'm blending that outline in towards the middle, because it's a little bit harsh. And then I'm just doing the same for the bottom part of the stalk, but unfortunately it was slightly off camera. Sorry about that, but I'm sure you can tell what I'm doing. Now I'm going back in and adding some more shading to the underneath of the mushroom. I'm going right along that edge, and then adding some more detailing of those gills, some darker little bits. And then just more shading towards the middle area as it gets towards the stalk. Now I'm covering the whole of the top bit in these little dashes with this tiny detail brush. And then now I've got some more diluted colour on my brush, and I'm adding some more shading. So some of those little dashes are actually covered up, and then it just kind of reveals the ones in the middle. adding some shading around the edges of this little part. Don't know what it's called. It looks like some kind of little skirt. So I'm just kind of going right around the edges just to give it a bit of definition. And then onto the bottom part of the stalk, and same sort of thing as above, adding shading around the edges, leaving kind of a highlighted part in the middle, and then I go a lot darker because I want that little skirt part to stick out. So I want that little skirt part to look like it's sticking out and it's coming forward. So to do that, we need to make the shading a lot much darker underneath. And I will add more layers to that to darken it up. And then just onto the smaller mushroom, just the same procedure as before. And now I've got some really concentrated mix of that grey. It's fairly dark, and I'm doing a much darker shadow underneath and adding some extra dark areas into those shadows just to make the whole thing really pop. And now that the yellow parts are dry, I'm painting the black, what would be the black parts of the bee in this Payne's grey. I've painted a really light layer on the head, and then I'm going in, I've got some of that neat Payne's grey on my brush. I've just got it neat right from the pan, and I'm going round the outside of the head and the bottom half. So we've got a highlight in the kind of the top middle there. So I'm painting Payne's grey on the wings, a really, really light layer. And then I'm drying my brush off and I'm taking out the middle area so that it's a little bit shaded around the edges. Now I can't paint that second wing on that one until that one's dry, so I'll move on to another bee and just keep doing the same. I'm going to add some of this snail trail colour to the bee's wings, and it's from this little pastel set. Now I do sell these paints, these are my own handmade watercolours, and this colour is absolutely gorgeous. These are available to purchase on my website. This is the pastel set, and I'll put a link below if you're interested in having a look at those. So I'm just mixing up some of this on the palette, and it's just a lovely, lovely kind of silvery shimmer. And I've just added a layer of that to all of the wings. Unfortunately, I lost that little bit of footage, but you can see how gorgeous it is. And I just, very, very simple. Once the wings were dry, I just painted a layer over that. And now I'm gonna add some shading to the yellow areas. So I've just mixed up some burnt sienna, and I'm just adding it to the bottom area of the yellow parts, just kind of about halfway up. And then I'm going to do the same with the black parts, only obviously we're using Payne's grey, and I've made a much stronger mix and paint that on to the bottom half of the area. And now I've made up an even more concentrated mix of that burnt sienna, and I'm adding a little dot to the very, very bottom, and then again the same with the Payne's grey parts. And it makes the bees look more three-dimensional. Next I've got some super concentrated Payne's grey till it almost looks black, and I'm painting in the little antennae and the little legs on the bees. And if you probably can't see the pencil marks anymore, so if you just refer back to the line drawing, you can see whereabouts they go, and then just adding a little eye on them as well.
Sway there in all the colors. Summer.
Now I'm just tidying the bees up a little bit. I'm darkening some parts because I didn't think the black bits were dark enough, so I'm just adding some more paint there, and just generally trying to tidy them up a little bit.
Open air, side by side we sway there in all the colors. Summer love.
So I'm adding a little bit of watered down Payne's grey underneath just to add some shadows. So if you look at the difference there, you can see how adding that shadow makes a big difference in making it look like the bees really there sitting on top of the mushroom. And now I've got a super tiny little brush. I think it's a 10/1. I think this is probably the smallest brush you can get, and I'm adding some tiny little veins with the Payne's grey, and that's going over the top of the snail trail colour. And now I'm making a mix for the grass. So I've got two little patches of Sap Green there, and I'm adding some red to make it into a warm green. Now one of them's a lot warmer than the other because I want some variation in the colour in the grass. So I've got pure Sap Green, some Sap Green with a little bit of red, and then some Sap Green with much more red. And I'm just going around the underneath of the mushroom and along the edge of where the grass would be, and just painting quite a messy layer, and it's wet on to dry, and then I'm adding more water on my brush and kind of bringing that down, blending that out a little bit, but in a more messy fashion. And then I'm dropping in some of the much warmer green that I made and just letting it blend in, and it just creates a nice grass variation. And then I'm dropping in some of the sap green at the top and just letting it run in, and as you can see I've left little bits of white as well, just little random bits of white, and then I'm using the brush to create some nice strokes of grass.
Honeysuckle, fresh cut grass. I could really use some stuff like that. Talk to me and tell me all that you've seen, all the colors, summer love.
And then using the tip of the brush, I'm just making these little dashes to make it look like it's some kind of wild grasses in the background. And then I'm using the Winsor lemon here, or the Winsor Yellow, and I'm just going to create a little flower. So there's just like the yellow middle, and then I make some petals with the burnt sienna.
Turquoise blue, losing track of time with you. Another peach pie sunset.
So just some final details. I'm just going around the edge of all these little dots just to help them stand out a little bit more, and just adding extra little bits of shading and shadows just to try and make the painting pop. And also, as some more final details, I've got a white jelly roll pen, and I'm just adding some little dashes underneath this part just to help make those little gills stand out, and some little dashes on the stalk, and just some other little details with the white pen. And I want a little bit more texture on the mushroom itself, so I've got some strong Prussian Blue, and I'm just adding some little dots and dashes and marks, because these mushrooms, they often have quite a lot of texture and little marks in them. And then I'm actually flicking some of that Prussian Blue all over the painting and just adding some random marks here and there just to give it some more interest. Okay, so this is the finished painting. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've painted along, but if you haven't, I hope you've just enjoyed watching the video. And please give me a like, please subscribe, comment. All them things really help my channel grow, so I'd really appreciate it if you could do that. And thanks very much for watching.
No place to be and nothing to prove. That's sure something I could use. a cure for the air conditioning.